Thank you very much. And can I just say hi to Chris Harding, because he's been a fixture in my household for as long as I can remember. We listen to his radio station all the time. So that's pretty exciting. So by way of introduction tonight, I'd just like to say how incredibly grateful and honored I am for the opportunity to share my story with all of you. When approached about speaking at tonight's event, I jumped at the chance. I couldn't think of a more suitable venture, given that this year, and this month in particular, marks such a meaningful time in my life in relation to my acquired brain. You'll find I do my best to see my experiences in as positive a light as possible. I wasted many years attempting to get back something that I once had, only to find that what I was searching for was unattainable. The brain changes itself. That's a documented scientific fact. So I've learned that any attempt on my behalf to become the person that I once was a futile mission. As you'll hear over the next 10 minutes, my journey has been less about recovery and more about rediscovery, learning how to use and appreciate my new brain, and seeing myself not as injured, but enlightened. As I started telling my friends and family about this evening, we all shared a good laugh and agreed that the biggest challenge I would face would be keeping my story to the 8 to 10 minute limit. As it turns out, that is in fact my biggest challenge. So, as you can see tonight, I'll be reading so as to somewhat contain my story. There was absolutely no hesitation in deciding whether or not to share, only how much and in what way. You see, since the dawn of the woman who stands before you tonight, I have been known as the queen of too much information. Just one of the perks of my new brain. Let me begin by bringing you up to speed on what exactly we're talking about as far as the injury is concerned, just to give you some perspective. On February 3rd, 1996, I was a 15-year-old front seat passenger in a car that slid through an icy intersection and was T-boned by an oncoming van. Two of my friends were ejected from the back seat of our vehicle, one with fatal injuries, and I was found unconscious on my way out the side window. 11 days later, I awoke to a new life, a new personality, and a painful roller coaster ride of a journey which would be the next 15 years. In addition to the closed head injury, one of my lungs was punctured, the other had pneumonia, and I underwent emergency surgery for possible internal bleeding. This turned out to be nothing at all, but would lead to many complications in the future as a result of the scarring. After a few weeks, I was transferred from University Hospital to Parkwood, where I would spend 3 more weeks participating in a daily regimen of the standard physio, occupational, and speech therapies. I was then discharged, however, because I was found to be a carrier of a staph infection, MRSA, and I was a threat to the high-risk patients in the hospital. From home, I was able to make great strides in my rehabilitation. Learning to walk and talk again was a wild ride. I actually remember running for the first time. I felt like a baby horse or giraffe with long, gangly legs. It was very awkward. And I remember working through how to form a sentence again, writing a story about my cat, which, looking back at it now, looks like the writing of an elementary student. But with an eager and ambitious approach to life, I sat through several 10th grade classes that spring, and by summer I was able to catch up on missed courses with the help of a tutor. In the fall of 1996, I was back to an almost full course load with my classmates. The hardest part of my rehabilitation and redevelopment, even then, was the change in social status and social awareness that occurred. I was less inhibited, more uncertain about social cues and interpreting people, yet increasingly more personally aware and living with more sincerity and appreciation for life. It was a really awkward balance for a 16-year-old, feeling less developed in some ways, but thinking more maturely in others. Unfortunately, even at 30, I still struggle with some of these exact same issues. I have adapted quite well socially, but I still find myself overwhelmed with the fast-paced game of life sometimes. I laugh at myself in retrospect, as I take someone seriously who's made a joke using sarcasm, or as I read nonverbal cues completely wrong. But that's just life these days. If that's the worst I have to worry about, I think I'm doing pretty okay. I find that the most significant changes for me post-injury are invisible. I have worked very hard to overcome my physical weaknesses and bring them back into balance. Yet it almost works against me now, as I am the perfect example of how a brain injury can be dubbed the hidden hurt. I look and present as relatively normal, as normal always considered relative, of course, but along with my tendency toward too much information or an occasional social misinterpretation comes a host of other unseen challenges: a documented anxiety disorder, mild depression, absence seizures, significantly increased fatigue, and difficulty forming memory, just to name a few things. Essentially, my new brain is working twice as hard to get the same outcome as that of my uninjured brain. Interestingly enough, at times my higher functioning self forgets that I have valid reasons for certain challenges, and life becomes then a balancing act of honoring the hidden hurt while still pushing the limits of ambition. Physically speaking, any kind of aches and pains you can think of, I've had them. From migraines to muscle pain and everything in between. The scarring and damage to the fascia and muscles in my abdomen has twisted my pelvic bone over the years, causing some pretty intense responses in my body. In addition, the scar tissue caused a partial bowel obstruction within a year of the original injury. That's something I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. The brain injury itself caused a left side partial paralysis, making my playing the clarinet and competitive fastball an interesting test in coordination. These activities did, however, go a long way in serving as opportunities for retraining my brain. I believe that through my involvement in both music and sports, I was able to create new brain pathways and bring balance and coordination back to my body. Overall, my recovery and personal rediscovery post-injury has been a long and winding road, encompassing physical, emotional, intellectual, and psychological challenges. However, I can honestly say I wouldn't change one step of the journey, because it has made me who I am today. I'm very thankful for the amazingly supportive people I have had cross my path along the way. My family and friends, my schools, rehab team, and now my employers. Thanks to each of these people groups, I have been able to both shoot for the moon and reach it. It is because of these incredible individuals in my life that I stand before you today, having graduated with honors at high school, with my cohort despite missing a semester, going on to acquire a bachelor's degree in college, also with honors. I have since traveled across Canada and the US, lived and worked independently in 2 different provinces, and after half a lifetime of umpteen different therapies and life experiences, I am now the office manager of the Cafe of Life here in London, helping others realize their health potential by way of straight chiropractic, increasing the function of their nervous system. Straight chiropractic, by the way, has been a godsend to me since I have a deficiency at the hub of my central nervous system. It's true that I may occasionally say the wrong things at the wrong times, coming across as insensitive or maybe oversensitive depending on the situation. It's true that sometimes I totally misinterpret sarcasm and social cues, so I might seem a little bit awkward. It's also true that I need a lot more sleep than most people, and my attention span might be a little shorter than some. But it's also true that with my power turned on and all systems firing through the help of my coworkers and some great supports in place for stability and grounding, with a vision of bigger and better things to come, I'm finding myself in a pretty great place these days. In closing, I would just like to share something that has been an inspiration to me in my journey. If it weren't for my faith, I know I definitely would not be standing here today speaking with you with such optimism. In 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verses 8 to 10, Paul's words resonate exactly with my sentiments of recovery today. What he's struggling with in these verses, he earlier refers to as a thorn in his flesh, a physical ailment perhaps, or maybe it's meant to be rhetorical. Either way, it applies to my situation, and I've come back to this inspiration again and again. He says, I implored the Lord 3 times that it might leave me, and God said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for power is perfected in weakness. Most gladly, therefore, I will rather boast about my weakness, so that the power of Christ may dwell in me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amanda, for sharing your story. Amanda's story of the invisible hurt is so prevalent in this province, with over 500,000 people living with the effects of brain injury. And many of them, we really, when you meet them, unless you work in the field or you've had a family member, you really don't understand that someone has had that significant injury, and that it's a struggle every day for them. And it's lovely to see that we have some folks that make it through the rehab process and are so optimistic as Amanda is. It's amazing to see. Thank you so much, Amanda.